off to the one side. You can move those around or minimize them if you're in your way. So yeah, let's just jump right in. So maybe I should be at the top here. I don't know where I am. There we go. So these are the programs that we're going to talk about today. There's a 10% temporary wage subsidy for employers. There's a 75% Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. There's a federal work sharing program. There's some things we want to talk about with the CERB, EI, and subplans. There's a Canadian Emergency Business Account, and we'll talk a little bit about accessing restricted funds. So let's just jump into the first one. It's the 10% temporary wage subsidy for employers. This is something that's been now in law for about 2 or 3 weeks, and quite a few businesses are utilizing that. The way this one works, it's 10% of eligible remuneration that's paid by an employer during a 3-month period of time from March 18th to June 19th. The maximum subsidy allowed is based on $1,375 per employee over those 3 months and $25,000 per employer over those 3 months. How you activate this one is you would deduct tax, CPP, and EI on salaries just like you normally would. So when you're running your pay, everything's exactly the same as it was before. But when you go to submit your remittances to the government, you can then reduce the amounts that you remit to them based on the subsidy. So an example would be if you deducted $2,500 in tax from your employees when you're running your pay for the month, plus the CPP and EI, and then you calculated your subsidy to be $2,000. When you remit that money to the government, you would only remit $500 for the income tax portion, plus what you need to submit for CPP and EI. And so that program is up and running, and from all I've heard is working well. The next one is this 75% one, and it's really just become law in the last couple of days. They've been talking about it for a while. They keep making a few tweaks to it. As of today, I'm giving you the information that we have. It's hard to know for sure if they're going to change it again. So to apply for this one, you do that through the CRA My Business account. For your church, and I would estimate that most churches don't have one of those, and I would suggest that you might want to activate one, not only for this period of time during the COVID pandemic, but it's just a useful way of communicating with CRA for lots of other things as well down the road. It's a bit of a cumbersome process to get the CRA My Business account. At least I found that the last time I tried. But it is worthwhile going through that process to get it activated, especially if that's the only way you can apply for the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. At this point, that is the main way you can do it. They may be providing another application online, but the whole application for this program is still, I don't believe, active yet. It's that new, but we can do this all retroactive back to March 15th. So once it's available and active, then you can apply if you feel that you're eligible for that. So to become eligible for this program, you need to look at your revenues, and if your revenue has dropped by at least 15% in March, that is the guideline for March. And then for other months after March, they're using a 30% threshold at this point, but there's always the chance that may change as we see how long this whole social distancing lasts. And it's currently it's available for a 12-week period of time, retroactive to March the 15th. So registered charities are eligible. So when it comes to defining what revenue is for registered charities, they say revenue includes most forms of revenue. So I would say pretty much anything that you show on a financial type statement for 1 month in your church in the revenue section should apply. Their one caveat is that any income from a non-arm's length source does not apply. And based on the question we had in the last session, it reminded me that also any government grant type money does not apply either. My question is, and it's just I guess a word of caution, is when they talk about arm's length and not arm's length, I'm not exactly sure how they would treat church membership. But I guess my guess would be that would still be treated as arm's length and it wouldn't be a problem. So to figure out whether or not you reach the 15% threshold in March, you would compare your March 2020 revenue with March of 2019. Or if that doesn't work, you can compare March 2020 revenue with the average of January and February 2020 revenue. So you have really two different tests, and then you just need to pass one of them to be able to receive the subsidy. And then in months after March, so I'm just talking about April, but it would be the same for other months, you would compare April 2020 revenue with April 2019, or again, the average of January and February. So to calculate the subsidy, this is right from the government's website, and it's very confusing, but at the end of the day, the summary is pretty clear, I think. So what they say is it's the greater of 75% of the amount of remuneration paid up to a maximum benefit of $847 per person per week, and the amount of remuneration paid up to a maximum benefit of $847 per week, or 75% of the employee's pre-crisis weekly remuneration, whichever is less. In effect, it may be eligible up to 100% of the first 75% of pre-crisis wages or salary. So for most employers, it's going to basically just be 75% of whatever you're paying your employees before all this COVID stuff happened. So the government will provide 75% of those wages. As an employer, you can just leave it at that, or you can continue to pay 100%, and then you're really only paying 25% when you apply for the subsidy and get back 75%. If you are doing both of these two programs, they will reduce the amount of the 75% program by whatever you receive from the 10% one. So you basically, you can do them both, but they'll just reduce the one by the other one. So those who have been doing the TWSC already, and then find that they are eligible for and want to apply for the CEWS, they'll just reduce what you get from that one by what you've already received from the other one. And then there's a link here that gives you some examples and more information on that particular subsidy program. The next one we're going to just quickly talk about is a work sharing program. If the church has more than 2 full-time and permanent employees, and they need to reduce hours for financial reasons or lack of work or whatever, they could enter into this program. It needs to be an equal sharing of work, so you need to reduce everybody's hours by the same percentage. And this agreement has to be signed between an employer and the employees and Service Canada. So there's really 3 parties involved in this one. There's quite it used to be a rather complicated application process. I'm not sure if they smoothed it out. They have quickened the process. This is a program that has existed before for employers. You can only be on it for a certain amount of time. They've extended that amount of time now. And what this program really allows is that if you reduce the hours of an employee and then obviously reducing their pay, that they can get some EI benefit for that. Without being in this program, nobody would be able to get EI benefits if they're still working, even if they're working less hours. So that is the advantage to it. It's probably not the first choice for most, just because it's a bit more complicated and you have to have this agreement done. But that link does provide you with details on how to actually make that application happen if you wanted to get involved with this program. Then just talking briefly about kind of EI and what happens if you do have to lay somebody off. So this is more from the employee's perspective. In the past, if somebody was laid off for lack of work or for sickness or whatever, they could apply for EI. The government would pay them, I think it's around 55% of their salary or something like that. If the church was registered under the fellowship sub-plan, then the church would be able to top those employees up to the 95% of their previous salary. So the church would cover that extra 40%, which is not clear right now if this is all still available, because under the CERB plan, so the CERB plan is kind of a new plan they brought in to help people who have been let go of their jobs because of COVID. They're providing $2,000 a month up to 4 months, so it's about $500 a week for employees under that. From what I've heard, since March 15th, everybody who applies for EI is getting automatically sent to the CERB program first. And nobody seems to know under the CERB plan if the church could still do the top-up part. Not even the people in the government who run the sub-plan know the answer to that question. So that's very unclear at this point, and hopefully they'll get that one sorted out. So if you do have to lay anybody off, and obviously you have to complete a record of employment when you do that, they'll apply for EI. they'll likely get put into the CERB plan, but if they actually do get EI benefits, not the CERB benefits, then you definitely can top them up. If they get into the CERB plan, you probably need to call Service Canada to find out if you are eligible or allowed to do the top up part. Then we can talk a little bit too about the emergency business account. So that's where they're providing interest-free loans up to $40,000. They've made that available to small businesses and not-for-profits, of which churches would, I would assume, qualify. The church would have to show that it had at least $50,000 in payroll in 2019. It was the only threshold I could find about being eligible for this program. Somebody else in one of the earlier sessions commented that they seem to think that the revenue from the employer had to be related to sales, which to me doesn't make sense if they're including not-for-profits into this category. So I'm not sure what was going on with that financial institute, but that's how you apply for this, is through your own financial institute. So if you are interested in this, you can check with your bank or credit union or whoever you deal with and see what they have to say, because they would probably have more details. And from what I read today is if you repay the loan, so if you did qualify for the $40,000 loan, if you repaid that before December 31st, 2022, you could receive up to a 25% loan forgiveness on that, so $10,000, which is that's a pretty good benefit. And then the last one is kind of a last resort, and that's accessing restricted funds. This is an Ontario only thing that I'm aware of at this point. I don't know if other provinces have done it. In the past, if the church received a restricted fund from a donor, usually in a church setting, that's restrictions around the capital, like don't touch the capital, but use the income for a specific ministry. In the past, the church had to adhere to those terms unless they obtained a court order, which was not an easy process to do because you'd have to get a judge to agree with why you wanted to remove those restrictions. They've now provided temporary guidelines to allow charities who are in danger of closing. So that's a really important part of this. But like I said, it's a last resort. The church has to be in danger of closing to be able to access the restricted funds. Instead of it going to the public guardian and trustee to get a court order, now you just have to notify them that you're doing this. And then the money that you get from the restricted funds can only be used to cover operational expenses, contractual obligations, or if your church is involved in COVID-19 relief work, they have added that recently to this so that churches could continue to do that. There's more information on this. It's a lawyer's firm that I found. If you're interested in doing this, obviously this is again a last resort. It's only to be used really to keep a church from having to declare bankruptcy. Well, churches wouldn't do that, but just from having to close their doors completely forever. So definitely a last resort. And that is the end of my slides.
Rob, that is excellent, excellent material. We appreciate that. Again, this is being recorded. We will be posting it up on febcentral.ca. I just got a text from Tom that his internet went out. So I think he's hosting us, but that's okay. We're rolling it up and going. Any questions for Rob? Make sure you unmute when you ask him, but here's our opportunity to pick his brain on any of these things. Go ahead and ask him a question or any clarification.
Okay, I've got a question. Go ahead, Godfrey, and then
Godfrey, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. Anyways, just with the CEWS, is that based on month to month, or say your April is 30% less?
Yeah, so that's
the whole 12 weeks. You don't have to then do it all over again in May if you're not, say you're not 30% less in May.
Yeah, this is something I think you have to look at on a month-to-month basis. So I mean, they just in the last week reduced March from a 30% threshold to 15. So I mean, keep your ears open in case they do that again for April. I have a feeling they're waiting to see how long everything lasts as they kind of change things going forward. So they may very well change April as well. But yeah, you need to look at this on a month-to-month basis. So you may qualify for March because of the 15%. You may not qualify when it comes to April, but then by May, maybe you do again. So you have to look at it on a month-to-month basis.
I see. Okay. And obviously that's at the end of every month. You have to look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now this is, you can go retroactive. So I mean, there's no rush in when you apply for it. So you can apply it pretty much at any time. Once you always have to get your books in order enough to be able to see what your revenues are. So
right.
It's, yeah.
Okay. So 1 month you might qualify and you get what, 4 weeks worth then?
Yeah.
And then the next month you don't qualify?
Yeah, that could happen. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Other questions? Tim, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. If a pastor is laid off and is using the CERB or EI benefit or both, is that money going to be taxed, and should they be setting aside, 10% of it or some amount? Rob, do you know what the answer is to
That
that?
is a great question. I was going to actually mention that in the last session and I forgot. The CERB money is taxable, which a lot of people I don't think realize. So you definitely should be keeping 10 to 15% of that set aside to pay taxes on later. If you get in an EI program, which I think right now is almost impossible, I think everybody's getting into the CERB program. But if you are on EI, it would work the same. It always does as far as taxes go. But CERB is new and it's definitely taxable.
Thank you.
Mike, you were going to say something? Mike Paquette?
Can I just ask, what's the fellowship sub-plan?
So the sub-plan is, I mean, it's not just ours. Anybody can set these up. We've had ours now in operation for quite some time. It's a supplemental unemployment benefit plan. So it's something that it's a one-page application, basically indicate how many employees you have, and somebody from the church has to sign it, send it off. We send it off to the government on your behalf. Because it's really run by the fellowship, but all the churches are eligible to participate. They just have to get onto the list. I actually have our list right here. We have a lot of churches that are already in this program. And then, so the way that works, so before COVID, if somebody had to go on EI, it's typically for sick leave. So the first week, the church could top them up to 95% because there's a 1 week waiting period with EI. And then after that, whatever benefit the employee is getting, the church could top them up to 95% of what they're making before they went on sick leave. So a great way to benefit employees if the church was wanting to do that. If you try to do that outside the sub-plan, they would basically claw back your EI benefits by how much they were getting from the church. And with this program, the church can ensure that their employees are getting up to 95%.
So the church, I mean, this allows the church to top up the EI benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, then I have one other question in regards to the 10%. If you didn't do that for the month of March, if my treasurer didn't, when they removed the payroll and they didn't do the 10% deduction, one, can we still apply, or can we somehow do that retroactively? And two, when you do that, does she have to let them know? She would just do it online and make the payment, right? Unless there's notes.
Yeah. So from my understanding now, we're big enough. We have a payroll company that's actually, if you have a payroll company, they do all this stuff for you. It's great. You can actually apply for this as late as the end of the year. Pretty much probably when you file your T4 summaries and you have to show your reconciliation to the government, you could wait that long to apply. And I expect that's when you inform them of kind of what you're doing. At this point, from my understanding, is when you send in your information, you just send them in your amounts less the subsidies. And I would expect then when you do you have to send in all that information at the end of the year to reconcile what your T4 summary says when what your remittances were. There's going to have to be something on the T4 summary now that accounts for this to show the difference.
So one further question to that, then the formula that you explained for the subsidy based on the remittances, that is on their website, the formula to do that? Because you said it's based on your deductions, not including EI and Canada Pension, because you don't get a deduction of 10% on that, on EI and EI and CCP.
Right. The 10% part is actually based on your taxable income. So what would show up in box 14 on a T4. Okay. Yeah. And then you reduce the tax that you're sending to the government by whatever that number works out to. And there is that maximum per employee of, I don't have it open here, of 13,000 something. But their website gives some really good examples. It actually walks through a number of examples based on how many employees, what they're making, and it's very clear. Yeah.
Then one more follow-up question on the 75% subsidy. You talked about comparing March to March, this March to last year's March. You said there was another formula that you could look at this year's March compared to January and February. Is that of 2020, January and February?
Yeah, an average of those two. So you do an average of what you brought in for revenues in February and January of this year and see how it compares to March.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? What do you think? That's good, Rob. That's good stuff. In the earlier calls, we did get some philosophical, well, theological questions. Should we even be going to the government to get these? And it's a good question. I think the general answer from Feb Central, which is lovely, we just bow out of it because you're autonomous churches. You're going to have to make your own decisions on that. That's up to the conscience of each church. I think I would say extraordinary times do call for extraordinary measures, and you know, just throw that in the pot. But it is something you need to work through in your own mindset as you're thinking about these. Any other comments or questions for Rob? This is good. Okay, I'm going to pivot. I want to pivot to the whole area of giving, and I'm just going to share 5 or 6 sort of things that kind of came to my mind as I was prepping for this. I think the overall thing I want to start with to say is this, that the majority of our churches get the majority of their givings through what comes in on Sunday morning. The majority of our churches get the majority of their givings through their Sunday gatherings. And so having that as a fact, now, you know, some churches are further ahead than others on automatic withdrawal and some digital giving platforms. But generally speaking, saying that means we're going to take a hit financially. And so what's happening, of course, is comparisons are being made now in Canada to the economy, not just to 2008, but to the Great Depression. So I you know, in light of all that, you know, we're not going to panic. We're not going to, you know, we know the Lord has allowed this. He's going to take us through it. There's going to be amazing stories of grace and blessing and advancement, despite the restrictions. But the reality is, as good stewards, I think we need to face the reality of this. So in light of that, I just write down 4 or 5 things. Number one, I think it's incumbent that you monitor every week what's going on financially in your church. That you monitor every week the revenues and expenses of the church. Where are you at? I think that's really important. And I'm not sure some pastors are quick on that. We've got some that do it all the time. Some are in the middle. Some don't do it at all. But I think in light of COVID, it's significant that you do know your situation, work with your treasurer, whatever, to understand, okay, where are we at in our weekly givings? I say number 2, be mindful of the cumulative effect. So for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, but we may be 8 weeks, 10 weeks into this, and it's the accumulation of some of the less that we're getting that we're really going to feel it hard as we go along. The further we go along, perhaps the hardest we'll feel it. Not saying that everybody will, but that generally, that cumulative effect is something to be mindful of. I would say number 3, we need to be proactive in planning and addressing shortfalls. Let's be proactive in it. So I got a call a few weeks ago from Bill Thornton. He said, I'm already budgeting how I can take 10% out of our budget right now. And thinking about, okay, if it gets worse than that, then running some scenarios to kind of, you know, address those shortfalls. So you're kind of looking at it in a phased approach. I would say, you know, right now, if you can look at, okay, what expenditures can we basically take out of our budget right now? Things that we don't need to spend. Just work really hard on, I think, you know, getting a sharp pencil and being careful on what you don't need to spend right now. One of the things I wouldn't cut back on right now, or anything to do with, you know, cameras or lights or microphones, I think that's important, or, you know, getting Zoom accounts going. I think that's really significant. But what are some areas we can begin immediately to cut back on? And then other scenarios you could be running is, okay, if things get worse, what are secondary things I need to be cutting back on? What are those things I could do if things get worse? And then if really significantly we take a big hit in this financially, what could we do in a third scenario that would respond to more significant loss? And I just think as stewards, I think that's really important to do. Again, I'm not doing it out of panic. I don't want to turn us all into screaming tele-evangelists that, you know, we need money, we need money. We know that givings, it's an act of worship. It's a walk with the Lord. It's not about equal giving. It's about equal sacrifice. So the widow's mite, I mean, she gave more than everybody. And so all of those factors are still in play. And I understand that, but I think even given that, heightening our awareness about these things right now is really significant. I think we need to regularly be reminding people that ministry is still going on. That's the first thing. I think that's really important. So on our online opportunities, or maybe through letters or emails or whatever, you're present, you're doing ministry, and you're finding ways in which you can express to people, hey, we're still preaching, we're still teaching, we're still doing ministry in a variety of different areas with volunteers or staff people. We still, have operational needs with, insurance and bills to pay and things like that. And so, your continued support is really good. I think that's important to be communicating. I think you obviously got to be communicating alternative ways for people to give. They want to give. It's a desire, and it's, again, an act of worship. And so mail in their gifts, or set up a strong box at the church. People can drop off their tithes and offerings, and online platforms by which they can give. I think reminding them of those ways and teaching them that is really significant. And I would say, thirdly, along with those two things, you're constantly thanking people. I mean, it's an act of worship. And we just praise God for, those people that give no matter what. And it's incredible how people sacrifice and set aside tithes and offerings to give to the Lord. And so as we're reminding them that ministry is still going, there are still things happening, we're reminding them of these other conduits by which they can give. We're constantly thanking them that they are involved and engaged in that, and involved in the ministry that way. I mean, I think, as I think about giving, and I'll just throw this out to you guys and you can kill me later. Like, I was at Springville for 30 years. About the first 12 years, I finally came to the awareness, now, not that we looked into people's givings. We never did that. We never broke confidences like that. But I found out that one of my key leaders and outspoken individuals who had great influence on our board tithed nothing to the local church. He was not a giver to our ministry at all. And so over the course of time, and as I gained credibility and people got to know me and they recognized, who I was and where my heart was, we basically said and got to the place where we could vet new board members and basically asked them and said to them, look, for you to come on, one of the qualifications is we need to know, we're not going to check, but we need to know that you're a regular tither to the ministries of the church here. And that was a huge move for us. And we were very sensitive how we did it. It wasn't something we broadcast abroad, but recognize that, you can't serve God and money, Jesus said. And so as you go through the Gospels and see how much Jesus talked about possessions and the whole concept of who owns what, and the reality that when we come to Christ, everything is his, of course, and we recognize what he's done on the cross and how he's given his life for us and sacrifice, we just give our all, and not just money, but everything that we have. But as we kind of journeyed along, we really began to realize that as you talk about discipleship, money is a key indicator, and attitude toward ownership is a key indicator. And Jesus talked a lot about possessions and false foundations, and when you go to disciple, don't take a bag, don't take an extra shirt. I mean, constantly, seek first the kingdom of God. All these things will be added to you. He's constantly kind of alluding to our attitude, good and bad, about possessions and things. And so, all of that factors in, of course, as we're in this COVID-19. Not that we should all be shifting into major giving series, but giving is a big part of discipleship. And it's a huge part of lordship and yieldedness. And so right now, I think, of course, the core people, they are there. Core people are going to give. They're going to show up. They're going to get it to you. They're going to walk through snowbanks to get that tithe to you. But then you got the casual group and you got the crowd. And the casual, you know, they need reminding, and they need just those times of you know, letting them know ministry's going on, and we need your tithes and offerings, and we do so appreciate your giving to us. So those are some things that I'm kind of sharing with you. How's everybody doing on the giving thing? How are you making out there? Are you feeling shortfalls? Is it okay? How are you doing? Let's just start with that. Anybody want to chime in?
Ours, Bob, we found 20% of our monthly money comes in through pre-authorized. The 80% comes in on the plate. And our first Sunday of the month, between the pre-authorized and the first Sunday, that's about half of our giving for the month. So that's been very important for us. But we've had a number of people just, we do e-transfer to one of our elders, who then just gives the list and writes a check to our treasurer to put into the bank. And that's worked very well for us. A lot of people have jumped onto the e-transfer, and then we just have people either mailing it or dropping it off.
Oh, that's great. That's great. People are kind of pivoting and changing, and that's exciting.
I have a question for Godfrey on that, because we've been looking into that as well. Are there any concerns that people would have about that, from the fact that the money is going to an individual who then is going to give a check to the church? I'm just curious about that.
We've had no one express that concern at all, and we've had a lot of people jump onto that. So no, I think there's a trust factor, Jack, with it.
Okay, our treasurer is looking into whether we can link our church email directly to our church bank account. So people email it to the church email address, and then it'll go directly. But we haven't quite figured that out yet.
Right.
That's what we ended up doing. Our treasurer, just from our website, people can click on a button there for giving online, and it takes them to the information. So they designate West Fort Baptist, and then the email is treasurer@westfortbaptist.org. And so that just keeps it, you know, going right straight into the church account at the credit union, and takes out the third party aspect. But I hear what Godfrey's saying there about the trust factor.
I would be concerned about having it go to an individual, because you're leaving him wide open for accusations, and I don't think you want to do that. We've got planning center at the church, and it's got various sections to it, and one of which is online giving, and it also we just recently started the text to give. None of our folks have picked up on that, but our online giving has gone up significantly since this all started in March.
Yeah, we have PushPay, and I would say about 60% of our giving was already coming in through PushPay. So we were really blessed with that reality before this even hit. But we've had a number of our seniors that have now signed up to PushPay as well as a result of that.
We've got pre-authorized giving, and that's been going for quite a while, and that is going up as well. We tried to get e-transfer set up at the bank, but because we require 2 signatures on transactions, they couldn't see a way clear to do that. So we went to the text to give route, which costs us a bit of fees. We thought that the e-transfer would have been free if they'd set it up, but they don't seem to think they can.
Okay.
Steve, you're going to make some comments. Steve Adams.
Yeah, if I might, Bob, thank you. You know, I think the thing that we have to be very aware of here, and I've been on all 3 of these calls and just listened, but people are talking in terms of a lot of people can't get e-giving and online giving and text to give. We need to remember that people under 30 years of age don't own checkbooks. And the week that we began text to give, we had 15 new givers, and this is a number of years ago. So when we don't employ these ways of giving, we actually speak to the next generation that we're irrelevant in that area. And And I'm all for writing checks, and I have no problem with that. But we are finding ourselves out of step with just the way that the world does their banking, and they don't write checks anymore. And so if you're dependent on 60, 70% of your money to come in through checks, you're basically isolating a huge group there. And the first time is always the hardest. And I saw a video of Hillsong Church in Australia. It's step aside from some of the theology, because I get that. But they had a 30-second video on Easter Sunday morning that was so concise and so simple. And on some of the calls, we've heard people say things like, well, seniors can't figure out how to give online. Yeah, they can, because they can figure out Facebook to talk to the grandkids and all of that. And the first time to give online is the hardest. But this 30-second video from Hillsong is so easy and so concise and so helpful that, it's, if you can't get it, I can't imagine that you couldn't get it. So we need to quickly employ some of these tools. And just a final thing, Bob, is I think, Godfrey, that way to give to an individual and then to the church is probably outside of CRA guidelines, because you're going to receipt back to people who the money didn't actually pass through them. They could prove that they gave it to this guy, but I don't think that's a whole lot different than the CRA guideline that says you cannot receive money from one person and receipt it to a different person. In my mind, I would really exercise caution in that.
Okay, thanks.
That's just my input.
No, that's good, Steve. I think it's so true. I mean, certainly me, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, no question, with technology and all of that. Now we go to Cedar Creek and we are online ramping and giving to them. We also are members at Springville. We go to, and Springville, we have automatic withdrawal. But I mean, you're right. We got to keep in step with what's happening. One of the philosophical hurdles I know we had to go through was just credit cards. Credit cards. We had a thing, Canada Helps, and man, we don't want to be enhancing people's indebtedness by the ease with which they can give with a credit card. And we had to go through that whole thing, and we got past it, and it's worked well. It's been actually enhancing and helpful. But I know there's philosophical things that have to be taught with some of these newer online ramps, and it's an opportunity for teaching, because you don't want to prevent people from responding, and people respond differently in different age groups, no question.
Brian,
can I just make a comment to Steve's statement about money coming in from one person that others have donated? I know with our pregnancy care center here in Sudbury, they have done that for years, and there's never seemed to have been an issue, as long as there's a very clear list of who's given what. And then the money is given, the receipts are then given to those individuals, but it has to be very clear who gave what. That, from what I understand, as long as that is clear, even though it came through one check, as long as it's detailed who gave what is, important.
Yeah. One final comment on giving that I should have said is, larger churches, of which I have been a part of, and maybe you men are experiencing this as well, but we realize that regular attendance means something today that is very different than what it meant 20 years ago, right? Regular attendance used to be 48 Sundays a year or 50 Sundays a year, and now it's anywhere from 20 to 30 Sundays a year. So pre-authorized and electronic giving means even if you only get them for 30 Sundays a year, you may get the giving for 52 Sundays a year or the equivalent. And if you're expecting, we'd like to think that everybody catches up for the Sundays they weren't there.
Never.
Maybe. But the one thing about pre-authorized and electronic giving is it does, in many regards, maintain a level of giving, and it will take the belly out of the summer, which most of us, know what that's like, and we're kind of in that 2 or 3 months early. But that's the other helpful part of it. And it's just the way that the younger generation does it and gives. And we're going to be forced into it now, but I think we need to get on it.
Yeah, Brian, you were going to say something.
Yeah. Well, just what all that's going on here. We've experienced all of this. We had flooding in our church basement just before Christmas, and that wiped out all our savings. So one Sunday without church, we knew we were in trouble. And the treasurer said, well, I have to let you know that most of our giving comes in on Sunday morning. And we were doing okay. I mean, week to week, but we were doing okay. So the next week I was unemployed. So we cut the staff in 2 days. And then March 23rd, I was unemployed. So I spent a couple of days thinking like, what do you mean I'm unemployed? What does that mean? Now, Bob phoned me about that time and he said, how are you? And I said, I don't want to be a pastor anymore. This is too complicated. But we made adjustments. More people are giving online. I do a Facebook Live every night, Tuesday night to Sunday night. Decided I'm still going to take Monday as a Sabbath. And so people go on the Facebook Live on our website. People who are part of our church, and lots of people aren't. And on that website, it's a Facebook website. If they just go over the side and click around a little bit, they'll find a place where they can click on it and give to Canada Helps. It's really very simple. So some people are starting to do that. I'd say a lot of people. I had a call again yesterday saying, from a younger couple, saying, oh, we really want to give our tithes and offerings, which means they haven't for the last 4 weeks. And we really want to do that. But how do we do that? I said, we'll just do it online. Like I was surprised I hadn't figured this out. But they were from another country. And so, they're wondering if, we're corrupt somewhere along the way, et cetera. I said, no. Like, it all goes to our church. Listen, it does. You'll get a receipt. It goes to the church. So that's worked out well. There are 2 or 3 older women in the congregation. They phone me up and they say, Pastor, I want to give my tithe. So they put it in their mailbox. They live close to the church. I go by and pick up, and I take it to the treasurer's house. He lives close to the church, and I put it in his mailbox. And the last time, well, one of these old ladies was standing at the window, waving at me as I went by. It's kind of a special moment. Just a comment that I didn't get to give last week that fits in here and fits there as well. And that is that after a couple of days, I thought, all right, I'm unemployed. I really suffer from the load of not just other people's expectations, but my expectations, but what I should do as a pastor. So, all right, let's just be unemployed. I'm still a pastor, but let's just drop everything and see what comes up. Well, what comes up is basically I'm preaching 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. And I love it. You know what my problem's going to be? Going back again. I love what I'm doing, but I know some pastors would argue this is what we're all supposed to be doing, but for me, it's just utterly unrealistic. But this is a great life. I phone people. I don't go to visit them. You can make a phone call. It doesn't take as much time, and I spend, my time studying, and then at night I get to tell everybody what I've been studying. So it's working out well. I did get the CERB thing right away. So that's good. That's very, very helpful. And they even gave me more than I expected because I applied in March, and they gave me some for March and some for April. So anyhow, so we're going along with that right now.
Brian, that's good report. I appreciate that. Mike Thiessen, you're going to say something. Got to watch our time, but go ahead, Mike.
I love it how I always get warned about the time constraints. Nobody else got warned, but I get the warning.
We're already over.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say to what Steve was mentioning earlier about just the online and the generational thing. Tom and I were down in Nashville, and everybody's trying to figure out text to give, and organizations who are taking that seriously are blessed by the consistency and the increase in giving. And Lifeway Research has seen that across North America. So
very good. Any other
I'd like to ramble on just a little bit longer.
Go. Closing comments. Anybody else? You guys have been so good. Wes, go ahead.
Can I say something? So thanks. This is the first one of these kind of roundtables that I've had a chance to get on, but appreciate everything that FEB Central is doing to support us. And, in our context, I got checks when I moved to Bancroft so that I could give via check to the church, and 95% was coming in through Sunday morning offering plate envelopes. And by God's grace, our treasurer said, as I feel like we're a little higher this month than we typically would be. And so God's just providing, and I think it's been exciting for our people to kind of own that and see that. So thanks again, guys.
Oh, look, that's been very good, guys. I think I'm going to wrap it up.
Hey, Bob, can I just make a quick comment?
Yes, for sure.
This related to Rob. The question I asked Rob earlier about, do you have to reference every month for the wage subsidy? The way it reads on the website is for the March eligibility, it's 15% less in March 2020, or the average of January, February, 15% less. The eligibility for period 2 is if you're already eligible for period 1, you qualify for period 2. You don't have to take it. So if you're good in March, you're good for the whole 12 weeks. If you can't start till April, you're good for 8 weeks. If you can't start till May, or use your May income. So you don't have to take it month to month. You can get the whole 12 weeks if your March was lower, and then 30% less for the other one. So
Will we get a copy of Rob's documents?
Yeah, Tom, what about that?
We have
Are you
recorded
frozen,
this.
Tom?
No, we have recorded this, but I had a problem partway through. My internet dropped. So I think it was still recording to the cloud, so it should be good. But Rob, if you could send me your PowerPoint, I would really appreciate it, because I'll probably, if I don't have this whole video to post, I will post just the PowerPoint at least.
I already did that, Tom.
Oh, great, thanks.
Rob, thanks so much for joining with us today. That's really helpful stuff, and we're all kind of feeling our way through this, but I want to just do a shout out to all the pastors on behalf of all of us at Feb Central. I mean, I keep saying Tom and Tim, but I got Steve, I got Mike, I mean, we're thrilled at what you're doing and the way you're ramping up and working toward getting online, and some are already up and running really well, and you're just getting better, and others are, their presence is there. It's never been there before, but just great to see. And again, I keep going back to Philippians 1, the Apostle Paul's in prison, and yet he's able to say, you know what, despite this, the gospel's advanced, and just that God would continue to use you as you're preaching and teaching and shepherding, even in a restricted way, that it would advance, the gospel would advance. And we are hearing of salvations and people coming to the Lord, and so be encouraged. We do pray for you, believe me. And it's been a very stressful time, and it's been busy. It's been busy. So keep it going. And I'm going to ask, who am I going to ask? Dave Gray, are you still on? Can you pray for us? Just close off our session here.
Absolutely. Let me actually just say to highlight or come up beyond Wes's comments, and I really appreciate everything you guys are doing too. It's been good to see the contacts and the support. So even from our worship director today, she was quite impressed with what she had yesterday. So hey, let's pray. God, it's great for us to be able to get together and even online virtually to discuss the issues of the business of our churches. And God, there's so many unknown things right now that we're not sure what to do, and we're grateful for the support we get from Rob and from the fellowship and from Feb Central, God. And we know that you have this all under control. We know that this is not a concern for you, but you know, as frail humans, God, we forget sometimes, and I just pray that you'd give us the peace we need now. For those who are seeing reduced income, God, we know that you will provide. You are the one who will care for us. And so we continue to pray for those of our brothers who are serving, and also those in our congregations who are experiencing these same issues. And we do pray that you would bring an end to this soon, that we can get back together in person with our congregations. We thank you, Father, and praise in Jesus' name. Amen.